Yes, that's right. It's Joe here, back on Joyrider TV with some more scintillating Q&A. And I thought I'd just steam straight in, actually, with the first question in the live chat, which I think you're going to find is quite an interesting one for those who have ever had jib battens getting caught on the mast. This question is from Jean and Micah, who I met the week before last at the Hilton Head multi-hole regatta 50th anniversary. More on that later. Okay, so yes, how can you stop your jib battens from getting caught? They're always going to catch. I think that is number one. Shout out to the Formula Wave Class Association. Thanks very much for getting me to Texas. Yes, very nice. All right, we're steaming in here. Pistols blazing. All right, so the problem, if you're not familiar with the problem, is if this is the trailing edge of the jib, we've got 4 battens in a Hobie 16 jib. This is where the problem usually lies. And yes, it's a Hobie 16 problem. And then the jib batten, whether you've got the fancy end caps or not, sticks out from the back of the jib. This is the jib, this bit here, and these battens catch on the mast. Now, Jean and Micah say they put electrical tape around the end of the jib batten, and that certainly helps. But what else can be done to stop that from catching quite as aggressively? Yeah, it's a tough one. You know, if you're keeping the jib as it is, which I would recommend, by the way, then what can you do? As well as taping it, you could make sure that the jib battens are very carefully make sure that they are as short as possible, but with still the ability to put plenty of tension into the batten. When you're tensioning your jib battens, if you have the sail lying on the floor, yeah, so if you, let's use this. So if your sail is lying on the floor like this, then you want to put enough tension in the jib battens just so that the edges of the battens, the edges of the sail, just lift off the floor slightly. And what that means is you're putting a bit of positive curve into the sail. So making sure the batten is long enough to be able to do that. So you could then cut the batten down. And I find there's no real benefit to the plastic jib batten end caps, which kind of look like that, kind of like the face of that big wormy thing that they land the Millennium Falcon in. Yeah, so that is a cap. And if you haven't got the caps, the other alternative you can do with your jib batten for tying it in is just basically to drill a hole in the end. And then you put the jib batten tie through double back to the jib. I've done a video on this. I'll try to remember to find the link. Yeah, so, and I find this method almost gets caught less often than the batten cap. And so if you had this method, you could just push the batten in, drill a hole in the batten, so that you can get enough tension on, then cut the excess off, shave the edges off with some sandpaper, then put some tape around it after you've tied it. And I think that is all that you can do to help to prevent the jib from catching on the jib halyard, would be the main offender, and the main halyard as well. The other thing that you can do with the main halyard is after you've locked your mainsail up, you can actually pass the main halyard round behind the trapeze wires, which means the hounds the fitting on the mast where all the rigging comes from is actually going to take the main halyard further back. But of course, you can't do that with the jib halyard because it really does need to be in the front of the mast. Yes. What else? Another great, here's what is always going to be a problem with catching jib battens, and that is in light wind. If you try to physically pull the jib from one side to the other using the sheet, so yeah, if you're trying to pull it across using the sheet, the jib will catch every single time. If there's enough wind to allow the wind to blow the jib from one side to the other, then that should most times stop the jib from catching. Because if the jib is being blown, here's the mast, and there, what would the jib look like if it's being blown? So the jib is just backed. So if the jib is being blown, it's going to put curve into the sail, which means the jib should just fold, just kind of slide across the mast. Whereas if you're pulling it, you're actually pulling the ends of the batten into those halyards that run down the mast. So allowing it to blow across is much better. But of course, there might not always be enough wind for that to happen. So if there's not enough wind for that to happen, then the fix for it, the kind of accepting that it's on the cards, so let's do something about it before it happens, is to actually get your hand on the bottom batten, push the bottom batten forwards, which is going to bend the batten, push the bottom batten forwards and physically push it across the front of the mast, and then that batten should stop getting caught. There we go. All right. Second part of the question from Jean and Micah is, where are we? Why does the trailing edge of the jib flap on the Hobie 16 even when sheeted in tight? Yeah, okay. So if the trailing edge of your jib, by the way, big shout out to Hussein in Egypt. Nice to see you, Hussein. Sorry, I've been away for getting the ball rolling with the super stickers. Yes, it's with these super stickers, might also be called super chat, which is keeping the Q&A ad free, because we don't want ads on the Q&A. Oh no. All right, so this trailing edge of the jib flapping, this kind of comes down to, you know, the fix for this is how you're setting the jib up. Which way round is the jib? All right, there's the corner of the jib with the clue adjust, the plate where you've got many fittings. So there's a close up, many attachment points, usually 5. Here we've got a stay adjuster with options of where we can put the tack of the jib. And by using these adjustments, we should be able to tighten up the trailing edge, the leech of the jib. Okay, so if your trailing edge is flapping excessively, it means you've probably got loads of tension in the foot of the sail and not much tension in the leech of the sail. So how can we tighten up the leech? 2 ways. If what I would generally try to do is set the jib so that you've got the tack of the jib as low down in the adjuster at the front as possible. Of course, me being me, I have to leave enough space to get a camera mount in there, but as low as possible, given that you might want to mount a camera in there as well. So usually that would mean the second or third hole from the bottom. All right, big shout out to Lee, continuing with a super sticker, super chat, keeping the Q&A ad free. Thank you very much, Lee. All right. Yeah, get your jib tack down as low as possible. And then on the clue plate, bit of experimentation that could be done on the beach. If you've got a tight foot, loose leech, what it means is you're going to want to put your jib sheet position up, because the higher up we're pulling from here, the more it's going to pull down, which is going to tighten up the leech of the jib. If you've already got your jib sheet in the top hole, like up here, then this means that you definitely are too low down on the stay adjuster at the front. So if you've moved that up and the leech of the sail is still loose, then start again. Move this up one hole on the front and then start on the middle hole. Ideally, you should have your jib sheet either here or here, or a lot of people put them so that the shackle actually goes between the two, so that the block is pulling from between those two. So with it in that position, try moving it up on the stay adjuster at the front until you get an even amount of tension in the back of the jib and the foot of the jib. There we go. I hope that is helpful. It's great to meet you guys in Hilton Head, and look forward to the next time. All right. So hello and thanks to Cux Oliver. Thank you very much. Also continuing with the super stickers, keeping the Q&A ad free. If you want to know how you can kind of effectively sponsor the Q&A with a super sticker, then next to where the chat thing is, where you write your chat in at the bottom of the chat, there's a little sign that looks like it's got a dollar sign on it. Yeah, just click on that and it will lead you the way that you need to go. But thanks very much. And thanks very much. All right, so continuing in the live chat, we've got Justin in the live chat. It was my great pleasure to meet Justin at Hilton Head. Justin is possibly one of the funniest people I have ever met in my life. No word of a lie. And I've met some funny people. On the behalf of the great state of Texas, I would formally like to apologise for the lack of for the wind speed you experienced at the Hobie Alta Cup. The race must go on. Come to South Padre Island next time. Yes, will do. I think it's definitely on the list of places I should visit. Although, having said that, on the last day of the Hobie Alta Cup at Corpus Christi, the wind did pick up to what I would consider to be just entering into that zone of this is fun. Yes, love it when you can lift the hull. I'd have to say that the Formula Wave really came to life as soon as you can lift the hull, and like most catamarans, really. And yeah, I could see why it is done. It's a really fun boat to sail without all of the what would you call it? The stuff that goes with a lot of boats. Less stuff, more just plain sailing. And I'd have to admit and accept that, yes, I did take an absolute hiding. And yes, it is actually the worst result I have got in a sailing boat regatta for a very long time. Yeah. All right, just like to say thanks very much to Jean for getting in there with a super sticker, keeping the Q&A ad free. Great stuff. Thanks very much. All right, so I'll just do a few more in the live chat, and then I've got quite a queue in the preloaded questions, as you'd expect, having taken a bit of time off the Q&A. So things do add up over time. All right, Space Padre, that's Jean and Micah, say it was Joyrider's 6-knot tour of the US. Yes, I think it's very important to connect to the light winds. All right, next in the live chat, we've got Rich, channel member Rich. Evening. Very good. We've got very exciting news for Joyrider TV channel members coming very soon. But since I've been back, I've started the production of a very this was actually Hussein's idea. Thank you for the idea, Hussein. Like a very linear series of classroom style like this, in fact exactly like this, linear style tutorials, lessons, lectures, seminars, whatever you want to call it, on how to, you know, the sort of things that come up quite frequently in the Q&A. So if you really want to nail down this kind of information that gets regularly delivered on a Friday, then there's going to be a video series launching soon, available to channel members. But I'm thinking to also make it available in other ways if you don't want to become a channel member. But it's I think it's to say thank you to everyone who has been a channel member, to give a bit more. And of course, the channel membership door is always open. Exactly. All right. We've got Cryptopher Dutton on board. Let's go sailing. Oh, yes. If you've got a boat, hope many of you are still able to get out this weekend. And yeah, I've just been sailing for 2 weeks, and I can safely say it's well worth it. Very good, even if the wind isn't blowing. All right, we've got RJ Fleet on board. Hello from Lake Benton, Minnesota, USA. We recently received 2.5 inches of snow, but the lake water is very cold, but not frozen. Have you ever sailed a Hobie 16 in such conditions? Is it bad for the boat? No, I wouldn't think, as long as it's not, you're not using your boat as an icebreaker, I don't think it's bad for the boat. I think it's bad for your fingers if you're not wrapped up warm enough. But yes, back when I used to live in the UK, there were occasions in the winter where I was actually taking ice off the boat cover before putting the boat in the water. And this was before I was fortunate enough to have decent sailing gear. And sometimes it was so cold that started losing feeling in various extremities, and it was still a good time and worth doing. But was it fun? Borderline. I think the pain really added to the experience. All right, thanks very much to Christopher Dutton, who I think we're just talking to at the moment. Oh, let's go sailing. Yes, for continuing with the super sticker, keeping the Q&A ad free. Yes. All right, continuing. We've got Aya Marina, who is actually Matt. Hello, Matt. I have a Hobie 20 Formula Europe. All right, here we go. Question: what mast pre-bend setup? There is 0 now. How to set the rake? All right. So now I believe that with the Hobie 20 Formula, which is basically the European version of the Miracle that is sailed widely in the US, we are setting the mast with some pre-bend. So what the way we're going to go about doing this, so using the spreaders and the diamond wires, this is going to be one of the topics that is going to be in the series available to channel members. First thing we want to do is set the spreader rake. Here is the mast, and then what we've got, I know we've been through this before, but I think it's important to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about. Otherwise, you might not know what we're talking about. So about halfway between the base of the mast and the hounds, where the rigging comes from, we've got spreaders, these metal parts that come off the mast. And we can adjust the deflection of the spreaders. And what we're looking for with, I think, a good starting point with the spreader deflection is if you take, you'll have the wires and take a batten or a straight edge. In fact, it's going to work better if we actually make these go back a little bit further. There we go. Take a batten or a straight edge. Here we go. Got a ruler, very handy. And put that between the wires, just onto the wires, either directly in front or underneath. Should give the same result. And then measure the distance between that straight edge and the trailing edge of the mast. Hope you're getting this. And that distance, I would start off at 5 centimeters. I think that would be a good starting point. Making sure, of course, that the spreader's all right. So that is the start. The next thing we want to do is start tightening up the diamond wires. Now, unless you've got a loose gauge, this is going to be quite tricky to do accurately. But what you can do is you start tightening up the diamond wires, which would be like there'll be some sort of adjustment at the bottom of the mast, which would usually be with a big spanner. You just start tightening them up. And then a way to kind of judge if you haven't got a loose gauge, that's a rig tension gauge, then what we can do, let's have another mast, is if this is the mast, this is where the spreaders are, and then the diamond wires would come out something like that because they'll be slightly further back from the mast. The idea is that with tension in these wires, it's pushing this part of the mast forwards, putting a bit of bend into the mast, which that bend means it's easier to control your sail shape. So initially that bend is going to put a good curve into the sail, which is great for shape for lighter wind. But then beyond that, when we pull the downhaul further, what that bend is going to mean is it's easier to get more downhaul on, which with more downhaul on, we're going to flatten the sail, moving the center of effort down and forwards, which is going to make the boat easier to manage and faster in high winds. There we go. So how are we going to measure without a rig tension gauge? Firstly, if you have got a rig tension gauge, you put it on about here on one side, and the number that we're looking for on the loose gauge, I would go for about 35 as a starting point. And if you have got a loose gauge, you can use both methods to measure the bend in the mast. So if the other method to measure the bend, we can't bend that. So let's assume this is slightly bent and this line that I'm drawing is straight. We're going to use the main halyard and we're going to pull it so it is as tight as possible. So you might have to tie the bottom off, pull it as tight as possible. This is going to require the mast to be down. Or you could do it with the boat on its side, but make sure that the top of the mast isn't resting on the ground because that's going to affect your results. Rest the mast just above the hounds on something. And then what you're going to do is at the point where the spreaders are, we're then going to measure between the halyard, which is our straight edge, and the back edge of the mast. And we're looking for let's call it 25 millimeters. There we go. So 2.5 centimeters there. So that is what I would use as a good starting point for how much pre-bend. Okay, quick word from my key sponsor. Karen Bennett happens to be my wife, and my wife, Karen Bennett, happens to be a yoga teacher and massage therapist. So if you want to get yoga lessons in the comfort of your own home, Karen, my wife, teaches yoga online daily, but one-to-one lessons can be organized. I will try to remember to put a link in the description below. Link. I'm going to write it down. All right, link. All right, yes, I'm going to put a link in the description below. So if you're interested in yoga, good thing to do over the winter. You know, get flexible. It's going to make everything a lot easier. People often ask me, Joe, how do you make it look so easy? I'd like to say yoga. There we go. All right, so continuing. All right, Cuxolly says, great to see you. Have a nice time to everyone. I have to work. Oh, I heard that gets in the way of a great many things. All right, so again, from Aya Marina, which is Matt, the Hobie 20 formula, the European version, how different to the Miracle do you think about this catamaran? Want to upgrade it with spinnaker? Yes, upgrade with spinnaker. That is certainly going to add a lot of sizzle to your downwind performance. To be honest, I think it'd be a very interesting comparison to put them side by side, the European and the US version. But I think just from what I've seen, the most obvious, biggest difference is the European version, the formula, has pivoting centerboards. I don't know if I'm pretty sure they all had pivoting centerboards. In my, I've had we had at Wildwind over the years that I've been here, we had 4 different Hobie 20 formulas, all of which had pivoting centerboards. So I'm assuming that they all did. Whereas the American Miracles have dagger boards up and down. That would be one of the biggest differences. But if there's any historians in the live chat or watching later, then do put it in the comments because, you know, every day's a school day. Good to know. All right. So Cryptopher is Christopher, who I met at the Hilton Head regatta. Yeah, great to meet you. And yeah, even though the wind was light, I think it was some great competition. And thanks very much for not only the super sticker, but becoming a Joyrider Sailing Club channel member. All right, very well done. I think if Christopher can do it, everyone else can as well. All right, welcome on board. This video series, let's put a date on it when I'm hoping to get that out. Let's say I'm going to release the video series at the end of the month. And then once the video series has been released, it might just be, it's going to be in modules. So the first 3 modules I will release at the end of the month. And then I think a good aim over the winter would be to release 1 further module every week, which means if you're a channel member when it's all new, that'll be enough for you to start with. And then every week, your homework will be the next module. How about that? Each module will be about something like 5 individual video lessons, which will all be about 10 minutes each. So there'll be a load of great information and content there. So there you go. Very nice. All right, continuing. All right, Lee says, on my Tornado, the hooks, oh dear, for the trampoline pull out of the hulls. Yes. Okay. Could you speak to this, please? Yeah, I have some experience in this arena. All right. I think we're going to start off with an explanation. Yeah, this is really quite painful at times. We could say upsetting. I'm just going to use this. We're just going to use this to get there we go. New and improved. So front beam, inside of the hull, back beam, inside of the hull. Was it necessary to draw this? Who knows? Does it look a bit wonky? Yes. All right. So coming out of the hulls on a tornado, a Maelstrom tornado, there are hooks, more hooks than this, where the trampoline laces onto on the inside. And what has happened in the past, what seems to be happened to Lee's boat, which is the same as what has happened to my boat, is on the inside of these hooks, I believe there are individual little plates which the hooks screw into, which have been like fiberglassed into the hulls when the hulls were built. And because most tornadoes are, let's say, in excess of 20 years old, some of them have been exposed to a lot of the elements, a lot of stress. These hooks pull out and basically strip the thread off these metal plates, or the metal plates on the inside just disintegrate and there's nothing there. What is the fix? Well, I hate to say this, Lee, but I haven't found a satisfactory fix for mine. I think the realistic fix would be to cut a hole in the top, get in there, put something on the inside, and then you could either close the hole permanently or put a hatch in there. But I think closing the hole permanently would be better than putting a hatch in, because that would mean that what am I trying to say? The hull would retain its stiffness. It might even be better to put a hole on the inside of the hull, underneath where the trampoline would be, because that part of the hull, unless you've capsized and you're standing on it, is the least load-bearing part of the hull. So that would be a an option. But what I've done with mine, which pulled out, and it's actually because I anchor my my spinnaker block. There's an oversized spinnaker block there with the sheet going to the spinnaker. It's the added strain of having the spinnaker block attached there as well, which meant that that particular hook has stripped out. And the fix that I did with it is I've replaced the hook with a long bolt. This is very much a not satisfactory repair. Long bolt like that, with, and I've attached onto the bolt, like, I'm going to call it a tang, where it's like basically like a flattened shackle, which goes like that. So there's a loop coming off there. And then I've epoxied that bolt into the hull in an attempt to keep it in there. Yeah, that is the best that I could come up with. So, and then so that I don't have to lace the whole thing every time, I've then used a small shackle for that loop of rope on the trampoline to keep it coming. All right. So I hope that is of some help, but yeah, it's a painful thing. And maybe the only satisfactory solution to it is to cut a hole in the hull and put something new on the inside. All right, so going back into the live chat. Thanks for coming, everyone, by the way. It's nice that this is quite a lively one on the Q&A comeback tour. All right, so we've got Jim Bleck on board from is that Kana or Kama? Anyway, from Texas. Great to have you on board, Jim. Jim's a channel member. He'll be getting instant access to the new video series. All right, Christopher says, and this is a great question, actually. If you watched my videos from the Formula Wave event in Corpus Christi, on the Downwind, and in fact, we could tie this in to a question a preloaded question that I've got, which is from Eric. Yeah, all right, we're going to tie this in. So on certain boats, and it seems to be the boats which don't have a jib, to get from hold on, just getting organized, thank you, to get from Mark A to Mark B, the most efficient route for the VMG, which in the shortest terms, the VMG means what is going to get us there quickest. Optimal VMG, velocity made good, is actually to sail straight downwind. Okay, so there are few classes of catamaran where sailing straight downwind is definitely the way to go. And just to tell the story, the complete story, and so on a Formula Wave or a Hobie 14, as two examples, you'd sail straight downwind until the wind gets strong enough that you're then in risk of sticking the nose in and flipping the boat. Pitch ball. So when it gets that windy, then only for the reason of survival, start sailing some angles, because when we've got a bit of angle, if you imagine when you're going straight downwind, all the pressure from the wind is pushing on the rig, pushing the top of the rig, which is pushing the bows down. And if you're not going very fast, that is a lot of pressure. So if we've got 25 knots of wind, maybe we're doing 12 knots downwind, that's going to be 13 knots of pressure trying to get the bows to go in. So when it gets windier, or so windy that we think we might stick the nose in, by putting the boat at an angle, maybe we'll come up to like 15 knots boat speed. And also because the wind isn't directly pushing the bows down, we've got less risk of that nosedive. So that on these boats would be the only time when we wouldn't sail straight downwind. And just to continue the story of Downwind VMG, on a boat which has two sails, it is, even in light winds, it's always going to get us to the bottom mark sooner by sailing the angles, because what we're doing, even in, in a boat race, most boat races won't start in less than 5 knots of wind. And in 5 knots of wind, if we've got 2 people on the boat, we do need to sail the angle. And the reason for this is because we need to get our apparent wind machine working. The apparent wind machine. So we've got the induced wind that we create by going forwards, and then the combination of the true wind and the induced wind making the apparent wind. So even in a light wind, getting this apparent wind machine working is going to get us to the bottom mark sooner than sailing straight downwind, when the apparent wind machine is certainly not going to be working, because we're always going to be just with the apparent wind on the boat, even if, sorry, that's our true wind, but our actual apparent wind is going to be in the same direction as the true wind. So there we go. That's as much science as I'm going to go for now. So yeah, any wind, always on a boat with 2 sails, 2 people, always the angles get the apparent wind machine working. There are times when if it's super light, like less than 5 knots, and you haven't got much weight on the boat, then sailing lower can pay off, but only then. All right. So Christopher's question, why didn't the surfer stance work downwind? Yes, the surfer stance, I was standing on the windward hull. Very nice. And the reason that opted for the surfer stance was because I overheard someone talking about it, and I thought that sounds like a really good idea. This has got to work, and B, sounds like more fun, because otherwise, just sat on the boat, sitting there fairly stationary, sailing in a straight line, just felt pretty pedestrian, like almost felt like, yes, we're working the boat to go upwind, and then we go around the top mark, we get on the conveyor belt to go back downwind, and then we go upwind again. But I wanted to work the boat as much as I could, possibly a little bit too much. But the surfer stance was, oh, this is me. Here we are. I was standing up on the boat. And then as the waves were coming, so when there was a wave in front that I thought I could get on, I would shift my weight onto the front foot to encourage the bow of the boat down the wave. And then once the boat was going down the wave, to avoid the deck of the boat going under the water, I'd then shift my weight onto the back foot. And I really did feel that it was having a positive effect. Just really using my body weight to really send the boat down these small waves seemed very effective. The only thing making it seem less effective was the fact that the boats that weren't doing this were going just as fast. Okay, yeah, so did this work? It kept me entertained, and I think for the videos, it certainly gave me a broader perspective of what was going on. And I think if it's exactly the same speed, I would still do it, because when you're standing up, you can see so much more and have a much better picture of what's going on across the race course. So was it worth doing? Yes. I spoke to Tyler, who he was second in the qualification series, and he's one of the most experienced Formula Wave sailors out there. He said he did do this for a while, but then he stopped because he felt that by standing up, his kind of leverage being that high up did over trim the boat. So perhaps I had to be a little bit more mindful of how much beans I was giving it getting forwards on the boat. So there we go. All right, channel member Boris, who I met in Hilton Head, is on board. Great to have you with us, Boris. Coming in from Florida. Sunset Wingman, who I believe is also Matt, who I met in Hilton Head. Everyone was there. If you weren't there, don't worry. You come next year. It's going to be on again. I'm going back because it was exceptionally good fun. Dude, what happened to the car? Yeah. On my journey home from the United States, got to Athens airport after quite a lot of time sat in various airports around the world. Got back reunited with my car, which I love, and stopped about halfway for coffee near to the city of Patra, which is the third biggest city in Greece. And then the car, the gear selector thingy, just locked in park. I mean, I couldn't go. And that was that. So had to get a bus home, car still miles away. Sad face. Thanks for asking, though. Okay, we've got Stylus WQ5GM on board. When avoiding capsize when sailing upwind, the obvious answer is to release an armful of mainsheet. A complementary technique is to head up. Are there any risks relating to capsizing associated with this? Well, funny you should ask, Stylus, but this actually brings us on to our next preloaded question, which is from Mark. I don't know if you happen to be Mark and you're just giving me a little prompting there, but yeah, which way we can turn to avoid the capsize. So first one, if we're sailing upwind, the way that we'd turn to avoid, if we're using the steering to avoid the capsize, turning the boat up into the wind, it actually has the exact same effect as letting the sails out. So turning up into the wind, same effect as letting the sails out. And the best thing we can possibly do, if we really feel like there is a good chance that we could capsize, is a combination between of turning up into the wind and easing out the sails. It might be that you can only ease out the mainsail, but if you ease the mainsail and turn up into the wind, as long as the big risk here, if you're double trapezing, is that you actually overcorrect, you come slamming down into the water, and then you get washed off the back of the boat like this, attached to your trapeze, and you being off the back of the boat actually capsizes the boat backwards. So if you are heading up into the wind, try not to really ram it up into the wind, but usually if it's a kind of steady gust, you should be able to just, like when you're sailing along normally, you'll naturally be having a little bit of pull on the rudders to keep the boat going straight, because the boat, if set up correctly, will always just want to turn up towards the wind a little bit. So if you release a little bit your pull on the rudders and just allow the boat to turn up, so rather than pushing it to go up, you're just allowing it to go up, that's going to make it much more subtle. And if you feel that to bring the hull back down, you have to allow it to go up so far that the boat starts slowing down, then let a bit of main sheet off as well. Aha. So Stylus is Marcus from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, with an FX1. Very good. Nice to have you on board. Thanks for letting me know. Yes, so a combination of main sheet and not active steering, but I'd call it passive steering, where you're not pushing, you're allowing the boat to turn up into the wind. That is the best. But if it's a big gust and you feel I've got to do something immediately, maybe the hull has popped out of the water really fast, then yeah, push harder with the rudders. And as you get closer to being into the wind, the power should come off. Of course, if you can let the main sheet out at the same time, that is going to be in your favor. One thing you should practice when you get onto a boat, especially if it's not your normal boat, just happen to have here a set of main sheet blocks, threaded these earlier, you might have seen it on the internet, is just practice getting the main sheet out of the cleat over and over again, and just get into the habit of, if it's windy or gusty conditions, every time you sheet in, just pull it out of the cleat and hold it every time. And I've now sailed with a lot of people, and there are too many people out there who sail with the main sheet in the cleat, not ready to uncleat it. This means you're at the will of the gods at times, whether you're going to stay upright or whether you're going to capsize. So just get used to being really like half a second away to being able to uncleat. So that is upwind steering. In fact, in the channel members video series, we are going to have a whole unit module on power control. I think that would be a good one. Yeah, and actually, if you'd like to, do put it in. If you could put it in the comments rather than the live chat, that means it stays there forever. But if there's an order of modules that you think I should do, in fact, I'll put this as a community post on YouTube as well. I'll put this everywhere. And you can kind of almost vote on, maybe I'll put some suggestions and I'll say, which module should I do next? And you vote. I think that's good. All right. Next, if you're sailing on a beam reach, half wind, which way would you steer to avoid the capsize? Well, to avoid the capsize, best is do it on the main sheet. But again, if it's a big gust and you really feel that there's a strong chance you could capsize, then turn the boat into the wind. This goes against what you might have seen in some of the speed run videos where I'll be sailing on a half wind beam reach course, I'll get a gust and then I turn downwind. The idea behind that is not to avoid the capsize. The idea behind that is to go faster. Not only does Karen Bennett sponsor the channel by allowing me to have this career as being a YouTube person that doesn't pay very much, but also by looking after things at home so that I can go off to the other side of the world to do things, even when it's our wedding anniversary. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, so the third one, if we're sailing downwind, especially if we're flying the spinnaker and we get a gust, the most important thing when we're sailing downwind is that we respond as early as possible. The sooner we can respond to a gust, the better chance that we have of being able to handle that gust. So as soon as we feel that gust is coming on, and what we should really be doing is looking outside of the boat to where the gusts are coming. So if we see gusts coming, we can be ready to respond to a gust. Like if it's a super gusty day, if it's really gusty, you really should be able to see the gusts on the water. And if you see that you're about to sail into a gust, which on the downwind spinnaker up, you'd see it about here because we're sailing into it, then turn downwind a little bit before getting into that gust. And that will just take the edge off it a little bit. And then when you get the gust, if you're still not happy about the way things are going, turn the boat a bit more downwind. All right. Thanks very much to Boris for continuing, keeping the Q&A ad free with a super chat, super sticker. Thanks very much, Boris. Again, great to meet you 2 weeks ago. All right. And I think because we've been going now 52 minutes, I've still got a reasonable amount in the preloaded department. So if you could ease back on the questions in the live chat, that would be very good. So no further questions in the live chat unless you've already chucked in a super sticker or unless you accompany it with a super sticker. That would be great because, you know, 52 minutes is a long time to be talking, and especially when you've got more to talk about. All right, so there we go. Upwind or reaching, turn towards the wind. This is a summary. Downwind, kite up or no kite up, turn more downwind. The only time on the downwind that you wouldn't turn more downwind to avoid the capsize would be if you don't have a spinnaker up and you get a gust that perhaps you haven't responded quickly enough, or perhaps it's a gust that is immediately put you into a full code brown, we are going down here, boys. Then in that case, take the boat closer to the wind because that is going to take the power off. Like if you've got a gust and already you feel that your rudders are coming out of the water, then really quite aggressively push the boat up into the wind, and there is a chance that that will save you. All right. Okay, continuing. We've got Hans on board. Hello, Hans. Great to have you with us. Hans in Germany, who spends his whole summer out here in Vasiliki Lefkas, Greece. All right, Hans says on his Tornado, he has a track instead of hooks. Yeah, this is back to this hook issue. Yeah, there's been many different methods in the past of how the trampolines are being attached. We've got Rachel Evans on board. Hello, great to have you with us, Rachel. And RJ Fleet has come in with a super sticker. Thank you very much, RJ Fleet. And yes, so Hans says tensioning happens in the middle of the trampoline and at the front beam. So kind of more like, not to be disrespectful, more like on a Hobie 15, because that tension's at the front and down the middle. Channel member Jens is on board. Great to have you with us, Jens. As always, Kevin's with us from Illinois. Hope you enjoyed your time in the US. I had almost too much fun. It's true. Almost. But the good thing with what I do is it's the video editing that has to go on every day that is the insurance that I don't have too much fun. So after going to a yacht club dinner, for example, then having to go home to do editing means, there we go. Don't go somewhere after the yacht club. That's what they said. All right. So Rachel says, off topic, but for a bigger catamaran that's still nippy, what would you say would be best? Okay. Yeah. My experience doesn't go so much in, well, to be honest, doesn't go at all into big catamarans, like if you're talking cruising catamarans. But my experience has dipped a toe into big trimarans, or not necessarily big, but sort of cruising trimarans. And the one that I had experience with was the 28-foot Dragonfly, which is a Danish company. And I can safely say it was so much fun to sail, especially when it was windy, massively wide, with kind of fairly limited accommodation. I think it had accommodation for, what would it have been, 6 people, which, you know, you could say that's enough, but really good fun to sail. So that is the only experience I've got in these big cruising multi-hulls. But I have been on the really, like, the 40 to 50 feet long cruising catamarans. And what I would say with those is it's more about the accommodation and the comfort than the sailing. Hope this doesn't offend anyone, but the sailing performance on these big cruising catamarans isn't at the forefront of the design, let's just say. All right, Boris says, I might be racing next year, have a lot to learn and practice. Yes, there will certainly be probably more than one racing module in the course that's coming up. So very good. How can I get a customized panels color for legal for regattas for a Hobie 16? And is a Salt City trampoline race legal? Okay, so this is the topic of what is race legal, using aftermarket equipment on your boat. So if it is a Hobie Class Association sanctioned event, then all of the equipment on the boat, like the trampoline and the mainsail and the jib, has to be Hobie branded, you know, built by Hobie Class legal. Whereas if you're sailing in an event like the Hilton Head event just gone, then you could use any brand of mainsail or trampoline on your boat. But the best thing to do is check with the race organizer when you go to register. You should be able to contact someone from the race organization to find out if non-class equipment is legal on the boat. But like if you're going to sail in a national championships, for example, or regional championships, then certainly you will need the official gear for the boat. All right. Stylus, which is Marcus, said, I've had the main sheet stuck in the cleat when attempting to uncleat the main. Any tips for uncleating the main when in a hurry? Yeah, I would say, like I did before, just practice sailing with the main sheet out of the cleat. Every time you sheet in, uncleat. Every time you sheet in, uncleat. And it's just getting used that what you're getting used to is how much tension you need between your hand and the cleat. Because if it's really tight, then you don't get much whip. If it's really loose, your whip doesn't do anything. So it needs to be in that middle area. There we go. All right. If I didn't say thank you very much to RJ Fleet, thank you very much to RJ Fleet for the super sticker, keeping the Q&A ad free. All right, we're up to 1 hour. All right, we've got Platypus Dreams on board. Great to have you with us, Platypus Dreams. Just about to buy a Hobie 16. Yes, very nice. When I came across a mint Nacra 5.0, roughly the same price, what to do? Yeah, that's a tough one. Gosh. Yeah, a mint condition Nacra 5.0, you know, that's a nice boat. The Nacra 5.0 is the boat that came before the Nacra 500 and then the Nacra 500 Mark II. So it's a great boat, but you know, I'd always swing towards the Hobie 16 because of its track record of being really durable. But the 5.0 is a great boat and that sounds good. So does it come with a trailer? Does it come with a beach launching trolley? How new is the rigging? Things like that. And yeah, if you haven't already become addicted to the Hobie 16, then I would say there is nothing wrong. There's no reason not to go with the Nacra because it's another great boat. We have very good performance. You can compete in these boats as well if you want to get into some racing. But if you want to be racing in bigger fleets, then the Hobie 16 would be the one to go for. If you want to be running your boat up the beach more often, the Hobie 16 would be the one to go for. Yeah, I could see it's a tough decision. But I hope that helps. All right, Rachel says farewell. All right, thank you, Rachel. Thanks for being here. Okay, Boris says thanks for your answer as usual, always on point. Thank you, Boris, for saying those kind words. All right, so no further questions, please, as we enter into the last of the preloaded. And oh, sorry to keep you waiting, Rich. Rich has been in the live chat, I think, throughout, and Rich asked about F16 specific, which would be the same as F18 and Tornado, and that is all right. So where are we? To the point. The use of mast rotation, upwind and downwind. Okay. So what I think we could go pretty definitive here, upwind, downwind, mast rotation. Definitive in my opinion, which is just my opinion, but it's I think the settings that I was going for Lake Como was certainly in keeping with the trend in the Formula 18 fleet. So I think this was pretty good. So on the upwind, when we weren't lifting the hull and certainly weren't able to trapeze, then the mast rotation pointing at the shroud. And then if upwind, we'd been sailing with the mast rotation in this position, on the downwind, I don't see any reason to adjust the mast rotation. So that was in the lighter wind. So lighter wind, just put it there, leave it there, because that is going to be optimal for the majority of the time. And the reason for this is because it's giving us a really good airflow over the back of the mainsail, and it's putting more shape into the mainsail and the whole rig as well. So as it starts getting windier on the upwind, as soon as we start being able to lift the hull, I'm not going to go orange, going to go red. As soon as we start lifting the hull, we're just going to bring the mast rotation in. So about halfway between the shroud and the back beam would be the sweet spot for that. Once we're lifting the hull, and this is just going to help to flatten off the whole rig. It's going to help with our sail shape, with the shape of the rig, just to bring it in a bit more once we're pulling on some downhaul as well. Yeah, and then on the downwind, if we've been sailing upwind with the mast rotation pulled in, on the downwind, we will then release it completely so the mast goes out to 90 degrees. Okay, and then if we're sailing in, let's call it pull everything on as hard as we can conditions, when the wind is really strong, then we'll have the mast rotation on more. So it's kind of pointing at that corner of the back beam on the upwind, and then again on the downwind we'll release it. So that is the definitive, I would say, positions for the mast rotation. All right, so also hearing that downwind in these light winds with the kite, it's best to pull on more main downhaul and ease the main sheet. No, I would. Yeah. So would you pull on more downhaul in light winds with the spinnaker up? I would say no. If it's light wind and you've had the downhaul on minimum, I would, what am I looking for? Something that I can't find. All right, never mind. I would leave the downhaul in the same position, upwind and downwind, which is on the minimum setting, which would be when you pull the downhaul on, you get rid of the majority of the creases. That is the sweet spot, and leave it there for the downwind as well. Okay. Yeah. So that is what I would say. Yeah. And then once you've got the downhaul, you know, if your downhaul is in that position, then with the main sheet, you're just responding to what the leech telltales on the mainsail are doing. And so there's our mainsail, leech telltales. And what we're looking for is to have the sail trimmed so that this bottom one is just disappearing, which means that the sail is just occasionally a bit on the tight side, just at the bottom there. But we're not pulling it in so tight that these top telltales disappear. So there we go, Rich. I hope that is helpful. Okay, on to the next preloaded question. All right, this is from Tim, who again was at Hilton Head last week. All right, and Tim says, what is the correct amount of batten tension? Good question for a start. Yes, we touched on this earlier while talking about oh, cheers, Rich. Yeah, I hope that was enough of an explanation, but I would go with these. This is the settings that I was going for at Lake Como on the Evolution, and I think these settings were working, you know, really well. We had good speed. Granted, we didn't sail much at that event in the light winds, but in the light winds, definitely, if we're not lifting a hull, keeping the mast rotation at the shroud, it's putting more shape into everything. All right, so batten tension, yeah, like we said before, with the sail resting on the floor, just tighten the batten. And this goes for a lot of boats, especially if we're looking for a bit of power, tighten the batten up until the batten just lifts off the floor at both ends. That is the sweet spot which we are looking to put the battens into. You could put a bit more tension in if the wind was lighter, but if you put in too much batten tension, you then run the risk of not being able to get the battens to come across when you tack. So just having them lifting is a good spot to put them in. All right, this is an interesting one. On the new Hobie 16s, rather than the main sheet tying off on the top like this, they use, if I got one here, don't know if I have. No, I don't think I have. All right, the rather than the main sheet tying off here, it actually ties off on the side of the bottom block. Yeah, which you might think that's a bit strange. And also on the newer Hobie 16s, the top block, this is a 57mm block, but the top block is actually 40mm, which is significantly smaller. So why is that? It's so that you can get more tension into the leech of the sail. So because the trend with the way that Hobie 16s have gone, a lot like with a lot of other boats, is to sail with the mast further back. But this kind of starts to talk about the how much is too much mast rake question. And in fact, we're going 2 in 1. Too much mast rake is when you can't get any tension into the leech of the mainsail. So there is a boat. I think coming soon, I'm going to have a magnetic mainsail. I think I do draw a fair few mainsails over the weeks. Okay, so there's the mainsail. So what we're always trying to be able to do is get tension into the leech of the mainsail. If you can't get tension into the leech of the mainsail, then that's going to really hinder your ability to sail close to the wind. How do you know if you're able to get tension into the leech of the mainsail? Well, one way you can do it is set the boat up on the beach, go and stand behind the boat, pull the main sheet in, and what you're looking at is, does your mainsail, does the back of the mainsail, when you're looking from straight behind, does it come into line with the mast? Does it go to leeward of the mast, or does it go to windward of the mast? What you want is it to go in line with the mast, but no part of the sail to go to windward of the mast. That is what you're looking for with your main sheet tension. When you pull the downhaul on more, it's going to open it up. So means when it gets windier, you can sail with more main sheet tension because the downhaul actually opens the sail up because it's getting flatter. Means you can sail with the main sheet tighter. Now, why do we need main sheet blocks which are effectively smaller? It's so that we can sail with the mast further back, which is going to aid our pointing ability, how high we can sail to the wind, but without reducing the amount of tension in the leech of the sail. There we go. Why do we want more mast rake for more pointing? Because on a Hobie 16, especially, a lot of the lift, what's in the water, what is really driving the boat upwind is the rudder blades. So if we bring the center of effort of the rig further back, so we're getting a bit more over the rudder blades, that is going to give us more lift so that we can sail closer to the wind, get to where we're going that little bit sooner. So there we go. All right, continuing with this set of questions from Tim. How much jib halyard tension is too much? Too much jib halyard tension would be if either you can physically see the mast bending forwards. That is going to have required a serious amount of effort to get it that tight. But more usually, before it comes to that, it would be if it feels really hard or impossible for the mast to rotate. That is too much jib halyard tension. If the mast can rotate freely, then that is looking pretty good. When you pull on a shroud like that, it should move a little bit. Again, we're talking Hobie 16 here. Okay, light wind jib telltale. All right. So light is having them both flying straight back a very small angle to keep. Yeah, relative, it's pretty small, but all right. So in light winds, yes. If this is the telltales on the jib, all right, just going with a red one and a blue one. Yes, we want to keep both jib telltales flying straight back at all times. And yes, the angle that we have to sail the boat is going to be reasonably small. You know, the wiggle room that we've got. Because as soon as the wind comes more to the front, the inside one is going to lift. As soon as the wind comes more to the back, to the side, the outside one might lift. So all that we can do in the light wind, and it really is an exercise in discipline, is you've just got to be focused, laser focused on the telltales at all times. So you need to be used to how you're holding the main sheet and the tiller extension, knowing that you can be looking there doing other things like playing the drums, so that you don't have to look at the back of the boat if you want to ease the mainsail out. So you just go, mainsail's going out, easy. So you're always focused on the telltales. And then by always focusing, it means that as if the wind shifts or if the wind strength changes slightly, you can respond with a much smaller amount of steering, which is going to keep the boat going faster, which is going to get you there sooner. So just laser focus on the telltales and respond immediately. If they start going a little bit, respond immediately with very small movements. There we go. Okay, I think that is it. I hope that helps, Tim. Once again, great to meet you. And back to the live chat. Just to finish off now. By the way, here's the thing. In the USA, there's these things that everybody likes to use when they're drinking cold drinks. It's called a koozie. And while I was in the USA, I think I was given probably somewhere in the region of about 18, maybe 19 different koozies to keep the drinks cold. And it wasn't, to be honest, not really my thing. However, I found a use for the koozie. And today we're going to be flying the flag of the Mad Cata 50th anniversary regatta coming next year in the USA. Can you tell what I've used it for? And this is a bit of an unboxing. Yes, I've used it for GoPro protection. Yeah. And yes, this is brand new. Thanks very much to Greg for really going above and beyond supporting the cause by getting me this camera. This is the GoPro Max 2, brand new, just out, 360 camera. Can't wait to try this bad boy out. So thanks very much to Greg for the Max 2. And there you go. There is a top tip. Protect your camera with a koozie. Very good. Because at the end of the day, You don't want your lens getting scratched. Once the lens is scratched, your pictures will never be as good again. On the Max 2, you can change the lenses once you've scratched them, but let's just try not to scratch them in the first place. There we go. All right. So Stylist Marcus says, thanks for your awesome comprehensive answers. Thank you very much for saying such kind words. All right, last one for today. And this one is from Crowned Joker 840. Great to have you on board. Welcome to Joyrider TV. I sail fevers. What's the best way to get into catamarans? Yeah, a few different routes you could go down. The route that I went down, still a very popular route, and that is, if you are, which I'm guessing if you sail fevers, you must be kind of associated with a sailing club or a group of people who sail. Say, let's say sailing club, is ask around at the sailing club if they, this of course depends on if people sail catamarans at your sailing club, but the way that I did it was I asked around at the sailing club, is anybody looking for crew? And the best way to get into it, get a feel for it, learn how to sail the boats, is to start off by crewing for people. It means you don't have to buy a boat. That's a win. And it also means you're going to be benefiting from the experience of the person helming the boat. Another win. And the third thing is, if you ask the person helming the boat, would it be possible maybe between races if we can swap over and I can just have a go at helming? Most people are going to be all for helping. I'm guessing because you sail fevers, you must be a younger sailor, getting younger people into the sport of catamaran sailing and keeping it as good as it's ever been as a sort of participation sport. So start off by crewing for other people. It's the best way to get into it. The other way to get into it would be if perhaps you're not affiliated with a sailing club where people sail catamarans. If you know that there's an event coming up which you could get to, but you don't have a boat for it, like keep going back to it, sorry for going on about it, the Hilton Head Regatta, or even the Mad Cata 50, which is in New York, May the 14th to the 17th next year. These events, if you can get to those events, as soon as you think I could get to that event, then get in touch with the people organizing the event and say, I would like to volunteer as a crew at the event. If there's any experienced helms looking for a crew, I'd like to get into it with a bit of crewing. That would be the best ways. The other best way is to get hold of a boat. So my route in was I did some crewing, and then a Dart 18 became advertised at the sailing club. It was, let's say, not the best Dart 18. I think someone had dragged it out of a ditch or a bush or something. And I bought the boat, you know, I had to raise the money to buy it. It was £400, which is pretty much as cheap as you can get a boat for. £400 with a trailer and a trolley. Not bad. I sailed it every single day for around 10 years, up until the time when I actually got the job to come out and start working here in Greece. And by doing that, that gave me the foundation that I've just been building upon ever since. So there we go. That is what I would do. I hope that helps. All right, we have got Trisha on board. Hello, Trisha. Great to have you with us. Try to send super sticker or chat, but can't as I'm in Spain. Okay, not to worry, but thanks for trying. Belated happy anniversary. Well, thanks very much. Very kind. And all is well in the Bennett household now that I'm back in the Bennett household. So thanks for that. And thanks to everybody for tuning in to this special homecoming Q&A. And yeah, I was aiming, apologies, to have a new episode of Show Us Your Cat out this weekend, but unfortunately it's not going to be ready in time. Yeah, but when it is coming out, I will make sure that everybody knows that it is coming out. So thanks very much, and I will see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV. If you're sailing this weekend, get on the speed stick, because you know that it makes sense. Thank you.